In the late 19th century, Erith was a growing industrial town. The population was increasing rapidly, and major changes, such as a sewage system and electricity, were being introduced for the first time. The reason for this development was simple: the river.
From time immemorial, Erith has relied on the River Thames. It's its lifeblood. But it's a hard landing place, so it made it ideal right throughout the ages for seamen to land.
For businesses in the Industrial Revolution, good access to the river meant cheap and easy transport for their goods. Factories sprung up along the riverside. It wasn't long before some of the business owners found a more fun and relaxing advantage to being by the river: Erith's excellent sailing conditions.
The unique situation that it's got is that it's on a stretch of the river that has got severe bends in it, so that you get good sailing conditions at all times. And secondly, the width of the river, of course, at Erith is 1/4 mile, which is quite wide. So it enabled the bigger yachts in the early days of racing to be able to come down to Erith and get a degree of sheltered yachting.
In 1885, Mr. Frank Beadle, of Beadle Brothers Coal Importers, became the first chairman of the Erith Town Regatta. In 1900, Beadle and the regatta's secretary, Mr. Stone, helped found Erith Sailing Club. The name changed to Erith Yacht Club in the following year. In these early days, the sailing club was the reserve of rich industrialists. The first Commodore, Mr. Gaze, was one of the owners of the Cannon and Gaze flour mill, which had a site so large that it blocked the view of the waterfront for the people who lived in the town. The first clubhouse was the Old Corinthians Clubhouse by St. John's Church. From the outset, the club was as much about the social life of the members as the sailing.
And it wasn't unknown for the club members to sail down river to Canvey Island, Gravesend, and one of the places that they frequented quite often was the Lobster Smack Inn.
The merry men of Erith became known for their heavy drinking in sea shanties. They'd only drink beer from quart bottles. Pints were too small for them. The early 20th century was a fine time for the club, with ever-increasing numbers of members, boats and fixtures. Erith itself was booming too, and with increased activity on the river, the club found itself short of mooring space. After almost 3 decades in the same clubhouse, Erith Yacht Club was looking for a new home. In 1929, the club moved downriver to its first floating clubhouse, an old 1860s Thames barge, the Garson. Although it was much loved by the members, it was far from a perfect solution. It would regularly flood and even sink at high tide. At one point, the committee even stopped charging locker fees as the members' belongings kept getting drenched inside them. This didn't put the members off. They were too busy sailing a wide range of boats, including cruisers and large yachts. The outbreak of the Second World War transformed Erith Yacht Club. As in the First World War, the Royal Navy Volunteer Reserves called up many of the younger members. The older members who stayed behind were charged with keeping the club going, which they did against all odds.
Erith Yacht Club during the Second World War, like all other yacht clubs, were banned from sailing. The yacht club just kept going during the war as a social function. It was too big a club and too interesting a club just to disband because the war was on.
Every Saturday night at 9 o'clock, the remaining members toasted their friends overseas. The Garson itself joined the war effort, becoming the training ship Garson. Now, Without even a clubhouse, the club's last lifeline became a monthly bulletin which contained news and light anecdotes, alongside the names of members who were killed on active service. As the war drew to a close, the bulletin reported that the moorings, the club equipment, and even the Garson itself would all need to be written off and replaced. When the war ended, the surviving members returned to Erith, only to discover that the club was now a shadow of its former self. The members were now regular local men. Erith Yacht Club had long since ceased to be the domain of rich industrialists. For £160 they purchased a new timber clubhouse, an ex-Trinity House lightboat, which they named Garson To. They rolled up their sleeves and set about painstakingly renovating it. The river was open for use again, and so the club restarted with a new lease of life. One of the members who had survived the war was Michael Robinson. Robbie, as he was affectionately known, was a world expert in Dutch marine art and became one of the most dedicated members of the club.
Robbie would always wear extraordinary old clothing. I suppose really he was just part of his character. Whenever you see a photograph of Robbie, he's always wearing the same woolly hat and the khaki jacket.
Robbie had spent his childhood in Hamble in Hampshire and was interested in the old workboats that they used down there, which were known as Hamble Stars. In the 50s, these 14-foot dinghies were being broken up, so he rescued some and brought them down to Erith. In the post-war period, Robbie was instrumental in getting children involved in the club for the first time. This started for practical reasons. Robbie needed someone to crew for him on his Hamble Star. Fred Fink was 11 at the time.
He came over and saw my father and said, "I don't want an adult in the dinghy with me." He said, "Because they weigh too much." And my father sort of said, "Yes, that's okay by me." And that's how I started sailing dinghies at Erith Yacht Club. We always used to win because the cruisers in those days were so much bigger and heavier, and they weren't designed to sail that fast. It's like racing a push bike against a motorbike, I suppose. I was the only kid down here, and everybody else was much older, and they're all ex-military because the war had just finished. I thought they were a load of grumpy old men. They used to moan to my father if I ran so much across the deck on the club ship. But on the other hand, if they saw me tying a bowline incorrectly or sculling incorrectly or rowing not properly, they used to pull me to one side and say, "That is the way you do it, not like this."
When Fred left to join the Merchant Navy, Robbie invited some 11-year-old boys from the local Sea Scouts to join the club, and he trained them to sail the Hamble Stars. He even had some more boats built for this purpose. These children became known as Robbie's Little Boys.
He had this little group of Sea Scouts. He committed himself to their training, and they had to commit themselves to being trained. We were told not to misbehave, and we had to keep quiet, and we weren't allowed to make too much noise and that sort of thing, all of which we did, of course. The boys that I was mostly friendly with and sailed against were Stephen Green, Gerald Lewin and Keith French.
The boys soon began racing each other in the Hamble Stars, and the young sailor they all wanted to beat was Stephen Green.
I always used to think that he got a better boat than me, but he always used to reckon he was a better helm.
My boat was the fastest, let's put it that way. Now, whether that was me or whether it was the boat or whether it was a bit of both, I don't know. I suppose the first one I remember was I won a handicap class at Swanage Regatta and came home with a large cup, which was somewhat memorable when I was perhaps 15. And this is Erith Town Regatta 1958.
Races took the boys far from Erith. Stephen remembers an annual race fixture against the naval training cadets of HMS Worcester.
When we first went down there, we went on board this magnificent boat. It looked as though it was new. The decks were scrubbed teak and everything was spick and span. The brass was polished. We came from here where it was thick black mud. We would go down in tatty baseball boots, probably some mud still clinging to them, old clothing, and we would go on board this ship with the cadets in their uniforms, taken down below and given a magnificent spread of tea after the events. And it was, I felt a little out of place.
Everyone at the club was expected to help out when it came to club maintenance.
If you wanted the club to exist, you had to do an awful lot of things which couldn't be regarded as sailing. The sort of concept that if you want something out of life, you've got to put something back in. There, what you got out of it was, say, 5%, and what you had to put in was 95%. You came down with scruffy clothes, got dirty, and went home with dirty, scruffy clothes.
One of the recurring problems they encountered was how to get the boats in and out of the water. In the mid-60s, Stephen Green's father, Jimmy, came up with a solution. A unique and innovative causeway design, which the boys helped to build.
My father was a manager of one of the mills in the docks, and they were replacing the sides of the docks, which were big pieces of wood. And so my father managed to get hold of these pieces of wood, and they floated them down on the ebb tide. These dock sides were cut with big double-handed saws, holes drilled with augers, and then railway lines bolted on top. And then the whole thing was driven by a winch powered by an old motorcycle engine.
We had people like Robbie, who was a maritime art specialist, but there he would be up to his knees in mud, finding solutions to problems that other people would have perhaps called up a special engineer. At Erith Yacht Club, the ethos has always been to solve those problems yourself, and this is something that we learnt from being one of Robbie's little boys.
The club helped its members to see the world. Brian Smart took a self-built boat all the way to Australia, and every year Robbie took the boys on a club trip to Holland.
Another annual event in the life of the club has been the trip of 4 stars to Holland for 2 weeks sailing on the lakes of Friesland. The boats are towed upriver to the lower pool. There's a brew up halfway, of course.
I'm captivated by, obviously, being able to smoke. It seemed to be that I could walk into a tobacconist and buy cigarettes and things like that without a buy or leave.
We camped on the boats. What we did was put the floorboards up on the seats and put sleeping bags on those, raise the boom a little bit and put a tent over the top. So that was our sleeping quarters. So it was a cheap holiday.
In the 60s, the club opened its doors wider to allow women to join.
Newer members started to bring in some lady members, so I can remember Anne Postle and Fink joining the club. Anne used to just pile in with the little boys and did all the things that we did. She was great.
I was 16 when I first came down here. It was actually on my father's birthday, so I've always remembered. Every Sunday we used to come down, weather permitting. There'd be racing, there'd be sailing around, just whatever people wanted to do.
Throughout the 50s, 60s and 70s, the heart of the club was the Garson To, with the social life centred around the ship's cosy little bar.
The Garson was a lovely little snug, everybody had to talk because you were all jammed in a small space together and you couldn't have individual conversations, they were all one big conversation, Somebody started singing up and we'd all join in. But there were sea shanties, rugby songs, you name it, we sang it. Wartime songs. The lady members, if they didn't like it, they could go out, but the words weren't changed.
Louis was the king of France before the revolution.
They were absolutely fabulous, and some of them, I don't think perhaps Mum and Dad would have liked to have known that I was singing, but still.
By the late 1970s, Garson To was falling into disrepair.
Although we got a lot of fun out of her, she was a lot of work, you know, because of her age. She was leaking. We kept having to cork the hull to stop the water getting in. You could sit in the bar and you could hear the cutlery going jingle, jingle, jingle in the galley, and that was the rats in there. Honestly, I'm not joking, you know. And you could sit in the bar and get dripped on, and that was because the ladies' loo was overflowing.
So, in 1980, the members began to look for a new home for Erith Yacht Club. Following the tradition of Garsons 1 and 2, they were determined to keep the clubhouse on the water. This was the ship they decided on, the Fuga Fun. Built in Norway in 1938, the Fuga Fun was a large steel roll-on roll-off car ferry. After years of service, she had wound up in Southend, bought by a scrap metal dealer who was now struggling to dismantle her. He was delighted when the club took her off his hands. In 1981, she arrived in Erith and was guided into her moorings by Fred Fink.
I was rowed out to the tug that was towing the Fuga Fun, and I was taken up to the bridge on the tug, and Dudley Davis said, "This is Fred. He's in the Merchant Navy, he's on navigating office, he'll put you in." So I put the ship in and put the Fuga Fun into the same hole as the Garson left.
The ever-resourceful members renovated her, and with a more spacious and comfortable clubhouse, the club entered a new era.
By the 80s, we'd started to get girls in and women. The girls wanted something a bit better. We had nice toilets on board. We had running water. We had good power.
As always, Erith was a social and friendly yacht club.
This is a sailing club. Sailing basically for most of the people here is about racing. And they have a race, they come back and have a social. We used to have sort of a dance or a barbecue. The food, well, it was all cooked either open fires or a primus stove. It was good fun. And then we started a Christmas party. We'd have turkey with everything, the whole lot, including Christmas pudding.
But Fuga Fun had its own quirks and idiosyncrasies.
There was one year I was the MC, and it was raining hard, blowing like a stink, and everything I touched, like the microphone or a floodlight or anything like that, I got a belt, got a shock. But that was part of the fun of Erith Yacht Club.
The 80s was a lovely time, the 90s was equally good. There's never been a massive change, except I would think costs started to go up. People were more responsible at work, they had to work long hours. The nucleus was there, the little nucleus is still there. They didn't go away, but we didn't seem to be expanding so much. We still had the Christmas lunches, a little bit more sophisticated. We had plates. We got proper knives and forks, which was absolutely amazing. We got a cooker in the 90s, a real electric cooker. In fact, somebody bought a microwave.
In 2000, the club celebrated its 100th birthday. Both Erith Town and the club had changed in many ways over the years, but the club's spirit endured.
And I joined Erith Yacht Club in 2000. My first experience of Erith Yacht Club was coming here on a Sunday, which happened to be a work Sunday, and there were lots of members around, all getting stuck in on the causeway, doing things. Membership of the club is composed of practical people in the main. There are people who are former engineers, barge builders, experienced sailors, people who've worked on the river for most of their life, a whole range of people who are always available to help out and give guidance where required or where asked.
It's always been the sort of club where everything's been hand on. They're the best people in the world at Erith because they all help each other. We've never been a very rich club and that's how we progressed.
Although Fuga Fun had become the heart of the club, after more than 20 years' service, she was starting to decline. Since the repairs she needed would have been extremely expensive, the members once again began to consider a new clubhouse. The club was given the opportunity to apply for funding for a new clubhouse, with the assistance of the London Borough of Bexley. The funding required that the clubhouse should be self-sustaining, that it should provide more training opportunities, and that it should welcome a wider section of the community to the sport of sailing. And controversially for some of the older members, it would be a concrete building, rather than another floating clubhouse.
We wanted another floating boat, there was no doubt about it. We didn't want to come ashore, we were very happy to stay afloat, and we looked for alternative means. The trouble was there was no alternative means easily available.
As the building came to completion in early 2010, the members said a sad farewell to their beloved clubship. Fuga Fun made its final voyage back to Norway, where she can now be seen in the Hardanger Museum and Conservation Centre. Now, for the first time since they left the Corinthian Yacht Club building in the 1920s, Erith Yacht Club is based on shore. Unlike the Garsons and the Fuga Fun, the clubhouse is safe, clean, modern and spacious.
We got better showers facilities, we got better facilities all round, which is required in modern day life.
All of these improvements are helping attract a new, younger membership.
I looked around the last few months and we've got an awful lot of new members.
The club has been revitalised. There's more people on the water now than there were 5 years ago. On a Sunday there are youth sailors and they're sailing and they're using the clubhouse. They come and go and they're our seed corn for the future.
Since the 1950s, Erith has been developing its training side, and now the new clubhouse is enabling the club to nurture the skills of even more prospective sailors.
For the first time employed a club coach. So in this past year, for example, we've run training courses for children and adults on weekdays and at weekends, and we've also encouraged local schools and youth groups to come down and experience sailing for the first time.
But all of these profound changes to Erith Yacht Club have greatly affected some of the older members.
A lot of the old members miss Fuga Fun, I must say, like myself. Greatly affected. There's nothing like wandering around wallowing in mud, painting boats.
Some of the members have found a way to make the new development feel like past clubhouses, by congregating in the boat shed.
The heart of the club, you could say now, has moved from the ship to one of the sheds, where all the old people go and have drink and have tea. Like we had the closeness on the club ships, they feel that closeness if they make their own little kind of corner in a shed and while away the time by putting the world to rights.
With the new clubhouse, well, you actually have to respect it because it's new. So the majority of people that don't like that sort of thing or they want to come down and work but don't want to have to change their shoes every time they go to the clubhouse, use the workshop. We have a table in here and chairs and a cooker and we've got a microwave, so we're self-contained. So the joke of the club is we've got the shed committee and the club committee.
As the club has developed, so has the range of club boats.
There are a number of club boats here. We've got modern laser keels, Omegas, Stratos keels, and we've also got our fleet of handball stars.
There may have been many recent changes, but when it comes to the handball stars, Erith has retained its rich heritage.
I realised what a debt I owed the club and its foresight in keeping a class going like that, but also in allocating to young people. I didn't have to pay. The boat was just there whenever I came down. People bought new equipment for it, and I didn't think about that at the time.
Robbie's little boys are all too aware of the fantastic opportunity that Erith Yacht Club gave them.
I've been a national champion in various classes and sailed for Britain in international regattas. Those early lessons that we learnt in sailing have been useful for me right the way through life, and I'm still using them now.
Since it was inaugurated in 1900, Erith Yacht Club has grown, evolved and adapted to its times.
I've got grandchildren and all I can hope for is that they get as much fun out of this new club that I've had out of the old one, which it really has been good.
On the surface, the current club may be unrecognisable from the yacht club of the past, but some things have never left it, the dedication, camaraderie and enthusiasm of its members. Let's hope they endure for many years to come.